This isn't your grandma's cancer show.
Not your grandma's cancer show.
This is Not Your Grandma's Cancer Show. I'm Tatum Durock, and today we are delving into cancer scams. Both the people that fake cancer and the ones that troll us. You know, the ones selling very expensive snake oil, usually from Germany. Why is it always from Germany? And you know what? This is a time when we have enough on our plates. We're already dealing with so much and side effects and going to the hospital, and suddenly there's cancer scams on top of everything. But I have the best guests here with me today to talk about this with, and to also give you the weird and wonderful tour of cancer scams, as well as places to maybe go to get some more research and find out some more if anything has lured you or anything that you've got questions about. So I'm going to get Kynwynn to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm one of the founding directors at Shine. And it sounds terrible to say I love a good cancer scam because obviously I don't love the scammers or the scam, but sometimes I just think they're so outrageous and amazing. I'm always up for reading a good cancer scam story.
Mm-hmm. and, tell us what kind of cancer that you had and how old you were when you had it.
Sure. So I was 34 and I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And that kind of brought me to thinking about this gap in support for younger adults with cancer. But I do remember being in the hospital and someone that my mum knew told her that there was a herb that I could take, which would prevent all my hair from falling out. And people wanted to know if I was interested in that. And I remember thinking, one, that probably doesn't work. And two, if it did work, if we're trying to get rid of all the cancer I have in my body, do I need my hair? Maybe I'll just give that one a miss. But so they start to hit you up early, these scammers, I think.
Right. And, who doesn't want to keep their hair at that point? Like, that's the
Absolutely.
thing. Like, you're so open to this kind of thing. I actually got given this pickled ginger. Highly potent, and I ate it for I didn't know what it was. I don't even know who gave it to me. I think it was a nurse or something gave it to me. It was so disgusting, and let me tell you, vomiting after chemo, pickled ginger, not cool. Not cool.
That's making me want to vomit right now.
Yeah. And also we've got Claire with us, and we're all on Zoom today. So Claire, tell us about yourself.
Oh, hi, I'm Claire. I've been around Shine for forever, haven't I? I joined Shine as a member because I'd had Ewing's osteosarcoma when I was in my late teens to early 20s. But the fallout from that physically and psychologically has been really long term. So I kind of hung around the cancer support scene and found this amazing charity. And over the years, I've kind of done more and more until I've vagled my way into it fully. And so I now do some of their programs with them, and yeah, it's great stuff. And like Kynwynn, I mean, it does feel not okay to say that you love a scam, but it is. There's something fascinating about the people behind them and the psychology that goes on for people when they kind of make this stuff up. And similarly, I also was given a little box of crystals, which when I was diagnosed by someone who'd had treatment themselves and said they'd cured it through crystals, and I was like, I mean, and the chemotherapy you had, right? Like, not just the crystals.
Yeah, they never mention that, do they?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that all three of us have our own, real experiences of that up front.
And have you met someone that's lied about having cancer? Have you met a cancer faker?
I have come across a cancer faker. Kind of, through someone I knew. So I didn't know them well, but yeah, somebody who I think thought that their partner was going to break up with them. And so they thought, oh, well, they won't break up with me if I say I have cancer. But, it's a tricky one to pull off, isn't it? Because if you say, don't leave me, I'm dying of cancer, and then, you don't die, I mean, it doesn't work out well for anybody.
No.
And so, yeah, they were definitely exposed, and I think it caused a lot of problems. It's not an easy lie to pull off, I don't think.
No. And I mean, there's so many things about that. And especially because we know that actually a lot of people's relationships do break down when somebody actually has cancer. That, like, if I wanted to keep someone, I wouldn't be saying I had cancer. Like, I would think of another lie.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
Right?
Very good point.
Because
Yeah,
some people
yeah.
run for the hills at that point. Yeah. Oh. And what about you,
Yeah,
Claire?
I do as well. I knew someone when I was younger who it wasn't kind of as explicit as saying I have cancer, but who started getting lots of symptoms and then was saying that he was having lots of treatment and that he'd found a tumor, and it was going down that route. And like you say, kind of like the level of work involved in creating that myth and the story. Like, there were documentation, there were like fake trips to hospital, there were people dropping them off at the hospital appointments, waiting around, and obviously they weren't going to them, but it's huge. And I mean, obviously there's a lot going on for that person, right? Like, it's kind of, there's something going on that needs support. It's just not cancer, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's tough if if you do have experience of cancer and then you want to provide support to them, and then you find out that actually they don't have cancer. That's really upsetting and disturbing to everyone else then too, because you sort of feel like you've put your time and effort into supporting someone when it hasn't been real. And that's really tough.
Yeah. And I think it affects us in quite a lot of different ways. So I thought, oh, well, maybe I know one person that's faked having cancer. When I sat down to think about it, I got to about 5. There was like a guy that I knew growing up who said that he had terminal testicular cancer. Somebody else that got like a really bizarre, maybe outside of the mainstream diagnosis. I had someone else saying that she had the same kind of cancer as my mum, who turned out to be a con artist. I knew someone else who, she didn't do it to me, but she had this big scar, and she would claim that the scar was anything that was related to the person that she was trying to get in with. So if she made you her best friend and you had cancer, then she had cancer. If she made you her best friend but you had been assaulted, then she got it from an assault. So she had been stabbed, she had like all these different things.
Wow. She'd really been through the mill, hey?
Yeah. On that one spot. I mean, it was a significant scar. I mean, it was a good scar, like, probably had a great story, but she would change it. And actually, I was thinking, I went into like a new group of friends once, and I was a periphery person, but I said something about cancer, and I felt this like weirdness just for a millisecond. And it turned out that the group had just been scammed by someone saying they had cancer. And I was like, I can show you my radiation tattoos if that helps. do you want to see? And they were like, no, it's good. We're just letting you know that, that just happened. And so I think that sometimes, even subconsciously, because there are some people faking it, that filters into the community of people that really have it. Do you look enough like a cancer patient? When someone says, oh, you look really well, do you ever feel like they're doubting it? Claire, have you ever felt someone doubt you?
I don't know that I think it's a sensitivity on my part rather than really believing that they don't believe me. But even the fact that that's in your head, that there's an element that you think, oh, well, do I have to prove myself? And definitely I do. Like, I mean, my cancer and conditions, certainly my conditions now are invisible. And there is an element of people go, but you look great. And you think, are you saying I look not ill enough to complain about my illness? Or are you saying, you think I should be doing more than I'm doing because I look okay to do it? So there's a lot. It just adds a lot to your psyche, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That you sort of carry with you, I think, when this stuff goes on out there.
And I think also, I mean, I don't know that I've experienced that. Probably I just looked so terrible when I was having treatment. People, there was no question there was something very wrong with me. But I do know people who, like, say, particularly maybe you've got bowel cancer, you've been having treatment, and your hair doesn't fall out.
Right.
And then they've experienced people kind of saying to them, well, do you really have cancer? Or, you know, kind of that, like, well, how sick are you if you haven't lost your hair? Because actually what the kind of common conception is that you have cancer and your cancer treatment will mean you're bald, and that's how we all know you're sick. And so when you don't fit that, then I think people are suspicious, and maybe not even thinking, I mean, I don't know what they think. They might not think necessarily you're full on faking cancer, but maybe just that you're not quite as sick as you're making out to be.
Right.
And that can be really tough because, you know, the vast 99.999% of people would never claim to have an illness that they don't have, just because, I mean, that's bad karma.
Yeah. Super bad karma. It's just the worst. Yeah, it's hard to imagine that. And I do think that one of the reasons that as a group we're quite susceptible to people doing that is because cancer is so diverse, that everyone's got a different treatment that two people with the same cancers can have. So it's not like you can just know enough about cancer and go, oh, they're definitely, you know, that's definitely not real. I was looking because one of the top cancer scammers has got to be Belle Gibson. And
Belle.
Belle.
Yeah.
I don't
Good
know.
old Belle.
If you haven't heard of Belle, she was one of the original, like, Instagram, whole food. She was, you know, considered to be beautiful, and she was beating her brain cancer, her terminal brain cancer, with a whole foods diet, and everything was gorgeous. And you know, she got huge. So Apple flew her out. They were going to put her app, the whole pantry, on the Apple Watch. She had a book deal with Penguin. She was on TV, and she shared her cancer journey, you know, the ups and downs. And she claimed to have several different types of cancer, which is unusual. And then I did some research. It's not as unusual as I thought it was. So even after being around the cancer world for as long as I have, it is rare. But the thing is about cancer is anything can happen. And there is a disorder, and they reckon that only like 1,000 people in the whole world have it, where you're just susceptible to loads of different types of cancer. So you could be, you know, you could have several, and they'll all be primary cancers. But yes, Belle, what did you think of her? Did you know her before she was exposed as a fraud?
I think I came to her near the end because I think I had seen something near the end when she kind of started to lose it, and she came out saying she had all these cancers. I mean, it was bizarre, right? Because I know that you can have different types of cancer, but she kind of came out, I can't remember the exact order, but it was basically like she had terminal brain cancer, and then all of a sudden she had like skin cancer, bowel cancer, you know, gynecological cancers, like 8 different types of cancers. And I remember thinking, well, that doesn't sound right. And then sure enough, it all blew up. So I'm, you know, lucky that I never downloaded her app or paid her money, but she made a lot of money off of that stuff. And, you know, she claimed she was giving some of it to charity. I don't think there's any evidence that she ever did. No. And I mean, I think she's not a well person. If anyone's listening to this and they want to do a deeper dive, the 60 Minutes Australia interview with her is well worth watching. But there's something psychologically a bit off, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And it brings up a really interesting point, doesn't it? Because like you say, we get the vibe, that sense of like, this doesn't feel right, but you also don't want to be the like asshole who like challenges someone who really does have cancer.
Exactly.
So like when I knew someone, the person I knew when I was younger, I remember reading the letters and going, that doesn't sound like a letter from a real clinic. Like, having been through it, obviously I was the worst person to try confiding because I knew what kind of things you normally get in a letter, and I was like, but it took a good 6 months before I was willing to even say to another friend, well, is there anything that is, I didn't want to be the person who did that first and was proved wrong. So actually you do put yourself in a kind of, you sort of protect yourself with this, well, who's going to challenge someone who's got cancer?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was the issue with Belle Gibson, is that no one really challenged her, even all the publishers of her book and Apple and all that kind of stuff. And later on, when they sort of went back and looked at what went wrong, I think everyone said, oh, well, we just, no one thinks someone's going to make that up. So no one had asked to see a clinic letter or a note from her doctor.
And so many people had given up their treatments to do what she was doing, and go on that diet and not take any other medicine, and she had absolutely no sense of responsibility about that, just nope, did not take it on board. But that can be devastating for people that really look to someone as an inspiration. But Belle is not the only one out there that's done that, because although Belle was very, very clearly exposed as a fraud, there are other people who it's just misleading. It's, they say, oh, I'm on this special diet, I'm doing this, I've cured myself. I'm thinking particularly of this video. Oh my God, it totally sucked me in. I remember just going, oh wow, that's amazing. They never mentioned the fact that they were also going through treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually, I would say, is it a hobby? It's not a big hobby, but one of the things I like to do with people like that is try to figure out, well, what treatment did you actually have? Because there are some people, I'm not even going to name them because I don't want to give them traffic, but there's a specific person I'm thinking of on Instagram who runs this kind of I beat cancer by going vegan and whole foods and all that kind of stuff, and bowel cancer. But if you look at the story, well, no, you had surgery. That's probably what cured your bowel cancer. Not, I'm not doubting that eating good food has probably helped you, but let's be clear that what probably helped you more was having the tumor removed surgically, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't get talked about enough.
No, it's it's a part of a picture that we often get. And, these are people in our social media feeds. These are people that we might have been given their books or read their books. I remember just the other day, I was like, where did the crazy, sexy cancer girl go? Is she still around?
Yeah.
What was her deal? She suddenly came back in. But at the time, I was like, ooh, maybe this is, what I should do more of, and do you know if she's still around?
Do you know her, Claire?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny because I went down a real rabbit hole when I was recovering from cancer and read her book and watched her. She had a DVD, which I ordered back in the day when you watched DVDs. Anyway, she is still around. And to be fair to her, she's not a scammer at all, but I think she has quite a rare form of slow growing cancer. So, when you say, I guess it's when you read that someone has stage 4 cancer and they've changed their life and they're eating all of this stuff and it's working for them, and you think, oh, great, that will work with me. Well, actually, you might not have the same type of cancer as they do, right? And again, in her case, it might have, the fact she's still here might have nothing to do with what she's eating. It might just be that she's got a very slow growing cancer, which is great, for her, but possibly not so great if people are giving up more traditional treatment that will definitely help them to go and juice some wheatgrass.
Yeah, it's, and it's an experiment of one. That's not a huge sample size, and something can seem to be working for one person, but it's also individual.
Yeah. And I'm always just really skeptical if there's any sense of kind of exclusivity of it. I think that's the thing, isn't it? So changing your diet and eating well and all those things is not a bad thing to do, of course, and it might help, but just doing that. And when anything says you can do it just by doing this. It's like that all those internet things, just this one simple trick, and you could be a millionaire. You're like, no, of course not. No, you don't believe that. So why would you believe it in the context of health?
Yeah.
Like, it's really unlikely.
Also, all of these people who kind of say like, oh, big pharma is hiding the secret, they don't want you to know, but if you buy my book, I'll tell you, right? So it's sort of saying, oh, big pharma just wants to make money off of you, but actually these people are selling something too, right? They are not neutral parties in all of this. They want your money so that you sign up to their program or buy their book or join their community, whatever that is.
And the thing that's crazy about it in living in a country that, we have socialized medicine, is that the NHS, if there was any way that they could save money, right, they would be doing it. They'd be like, eat your acai in a tutu at midnight, under a full moon. If you're surrounded by crystals, like whatever it was, they would get our asses out there doing that if that worked. But, it does have to be like a fairly large sample size and like a lot of research. And yes, if something came out, it would probably take some time until it was adopted. But I think the fact that we have a system which would benefit from something being free is actually quite, it's really helpful.
Yeah, no, really true.
Yeah,
I would totally dance around in a tutu under.
I was just about to
moon.
say,
would you?
I've got visions of like an amazing piece of research with everyone in tutus out at midnight,
surrounded by crystals.
I'd sign up to it.
That sounds great.
I mean, that could just be a Friday night for me.
Yeah.
I do things like that anyway.
I do know you like your crystals, Tatum.
I do like some crystals. I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, I've been given crystals from people, and how I think of it is like it's a present, and that's their kind of energy. And I think, there are certain types of materials where we kind of feel more comforted. And I think if we're touching something, we're even thinking about the energy in which it was given to us, or the energy that we're putting into something. That can be incredibly comforting. But there's a big difference between something giving you comfort and enjoyment or beauty and something that's saying it's going to cure you.
Yeah, and it's not to say that these like psychologically, how our experience of cancer might be completely changed by a particular practice or something that you have belief in, and obviously this is not to poo-poo any of that. Like all that stuff, if it works for you, it works, and that's brilliant. But exactly like you say, it's like at the cost of of any other treatment. That's when it gets to start to feel a bit dangerous.
So there are these terms. So there's like curative, alternative, complementary. Are you fairly familiar with those terms and what they mean?
Well,
I mean, I think I am now because I run Shine and the line of work I'm in. But I think beforehand, no, I wouldn't have known the difference between an alternative or a complementary therapy. Would you?
I mean, I think I'm still confused about whether that therapy can be the same thing. So like, can you have acupuncture or aromatherapy, whatever it would be, as an can it qualify as an alternative therapy and a complementary therapy? So, it's just, I guess that would depend on your intention. If you are having it as an alternative to traditional medicine.
Or as a complement to it.
Or to complement. So it's still a bit confusing.
Yeah.
I think the distinction is, one is that you have alongside other practices and medicines, and one is that it is an alternative and it's held up as a treatment in itself.
Yeah, and you're turning down sort of conventional medicine to have an alternative therapy.
I was incredibly lucky. I was being treated in the Disney Cancer Center in LA when I got cancer, and it was this beautiful building. It wasn't like Mickey Mouse or anything.
I was just about to say it was like Pluto, your doctor. And...
No, but there were like gorgeous fountains. There were images that were like superimposed on the ceilings in like the radiation rooms. I mean, it was lovely. It was so nice. And the whole second floor was complementary therapies. And it was sound bath, Reiki, acupuncture, yoga, every hypnosis, group therapy, everything you could think of. And they were really working on the idea of like bringing everything in together, because what can happen is someone takes a step outside and thinks, oh, maybe everything over there has the answer, instead of actually like working together as a team. So if someone was going to give you herbs, that they would have checked with the oncology department and everything, so I was really lucky that I had this sense of complementary like right off the bat. But when you just venture out into that world, there are a lot of people that are like, oh, so did you have a trauma when you were about 11? That's what I'm sensing. And I think that's what's caused your cancer. And you're going to have to really work on that. And there's going to be a lot of sessions of energy work to really undo that.
Energy channels, I was about to say. It's going to be clearing your energy channels.
Yeah. When those get blocked, that's when
it's the right bugger.
Yeah.
And, like way to make, like, you're so vulnerable. This is the thing. And, who hasn't thought at some point in the middle of the night, oh, maybe it did. Did my trauma cause my cancer? Like, but did everyone else's trauma cause theirs? Like, what's the strangest thing that you've puzzled in the middle of the night that you thought might have caused your cancer?
I have so many, but Claire, you go first.
No, I was going to say, because I was diagnosed at 17 originally. So it's almost like, I remember thinking, what did I do? But also, I actually hadn't done that much. Do you know what I mean? I hadn't kind of like lived a life of like crazy partying, so it was like, there isn't much I could point to, but I do remember people around me definitely like, is it something, bless her, my mum going, is it something I did? Is it something I took when you were pregnant? Is it this? Is it because we live in London and there's lots of pollution? Is it because, so there's always those thoughts, I think. And I think even, I was brought up in not strictly, but I kind of went to church, Catholic church, where it's a kind of, punishment is rained down from it, and you're like, oh, it makes you think. You're like, have I done something? All that. I remember years ago in the news there was that talk, wasn't there? People with disabilities. Was it a football manager or something? Said people with disabilities had sinned. It was because they'd sinned in a past life. So you get those kind of thoughts, and it wasn't even something I believed, but the fact you've even got them there is not fun.
No, I lived for a time in Vietnam, and I thought, well, for sure, something there. Vietnam didn't come out of the war with the US sort of toxin free. It was laden with toxins. So I was like, maybe it's Agent Orange. Maybe I used to eat a lot of these green vegetables, and stir-fried green vegetables. I thought maybe, they are grown in toxic water. I remember sort of wading through the Saigon River when it flooded, which is really, it is a toxic soup. So maybe that gave me cancer, but maybe none of it did, right? Who knows? It could have been, I used to fly a lot. You can read articles that say you're flying radiation will give you cancer. So it's anything and everything. And so it is, I think that's, like you said, Tatum, people, you're vulnerable, aren't you? And you don't want it to happen again or to get worse. So if I had really believed that flying had caused my cancer, well, I would never fly again. In the same way that if someone could convince me that, juicing celery every morning would stop it from coming back, well, I'd probably do that too. Yeah. But there's no evidence for either of those things, by the way.
I also blamed mine, again, a 3 a.m. thought, because I lived in Florida. I wasn't wading through any toxic rivers, but I just thought the whole state had caused it. Because Florida's fault.
It is a weird place.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is like we are vulnerable, and I looked on Wikipedia actually, and there is a list of unproven. So they're not all scams. Some of them are complementary, but people have tried to say that they're curative. And there was hundreds of different things on there.
Yeah.
And one of the things was there is a psychotherapy, an anti-cancer psychotherapy that works on the premise that your thoughts and how you think caused your cancer. Yeah.
Oh.
No.
Yeah.
So you need to learn not to think that way.
Right. And then
But
I
how
guess
do
your
they-
cancer goes away.
But how do they know which thoughts?
I know. I
What,
think,
just the bad ones, or like?
well, seemingly you're a type. You're a type of person that has cancer. So,
Oh.
You're a cancery type of guy.
yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So therefore you have to kind of, rearrange the way you think. I'm sure these sessions cost a lot. But it was really interesting going through and kind of seeing almost like all the different ways that we're susceptible, right? Like,
Yeah.
did you not deal with your childhood shit well enough? Did
Yeah.
are you that type? Do you think that way?
Yeah. And
Well, I
they-
think a lot of people get asked. I don't. You guys have probably been asked too, like I did. Like people would say, "Oh, were you really stressed out before you had cancer?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
stress caused it,
Do you think
right?"
stress caused it? Yeah.
So many people will ask you that.
Yeah.
And I mean, how stressed out were you at 17, Claire?
Oh yeah,
Right?
super stressed. I had
Yeah.
like exams and everything.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that they seem to kind of fall into, like, there are different types of scams almost to reach different types of, mindset. So you've got the
Yeah.
ones that are all about like emotions and psychology, the ones that are kind of more wellness and health and nutrition, and then you have the ones that are sort of they sound quite sciencey. Like, have you
Mm.
guys heard of the weird electromagnetic machine things, that
Yes.
cancer machines? Yeah. Like people, they've set up clinics with these things. I think there's one example, I looked it up, it's called like a Rife machine. And apparently it sends out electromagnetic waves and reads it, like it tunes into the electrical impulses of your cancer cells. I mean, it's all been proved, well, it's not been proved.
Has
This
it
is
been
the problem, isn't it?
disproved?
This is the problem. It's like, can you disprove something if it doesn't cause any damage? Yeah, interesting point. I don't know.
It-
But definitely
could-
they've sued people for having clinics and convicted them of fraud. So, I mean, I guess that's a big enough statement that it doesn't work, isn't it?
That's what I was going to say. I mean, the damage, it might not make you worse, but if
Yeah.
it convinces people it's going to make them better and it doesn't, and then they
Mhm.
get even sicker and die, well, then that's
Yeah.
not good,
That's
is it?
damage. That's
Yeah.
damage.
Yeah.
The other, there's also a kind of category, I think, of sort of products and scams going down the wellness route, but ones that sort of harken back to ancient knowledge, right? So one of my favorites, and this is what I spent this morning looking at, I got sucked in deep to some Facebook groups, is Black Salve. Which, like, I cannot say strongly enough, please do not get yourself any Black Salve. But basically, people believe that this ancient North American root has the power to, basically, you put a poultice of Black Salve on your body and it will filter down through your skin. It will kill the tumor, and then the tumor will basically work its way out. And so it will produce, at some point, the tumors will come out of this bulging, disgusting mess where you put the burning Black Salve on. And then you're often left with a scar, but that's okay because the tumor has come out of your body. And there are some really horrific photos online of people who have used Black Salve and it's not gone well.
No.
But then a lot of people who still seem to be using it. But there was a woman that I did a deep dive on this morning, who had claimed to be using it for her breast cancer, saying that she was removing microtumors. But she just had this one big tumor she couldn't get rid of. So eventually she needed to have surgery. But I can't find anything from her since about 2017. So I'm not sure what happened. I'm not sure the Black Salve worked. But yeah, it basically can disfigure you, and it's not getting rid of your cancer.
Oh, that sounds horrendous.
It really is.
But like these really like creative ways of being wrong. Do you know what I mean? People
Yeah.
like they really invest in the backstory, don't they?
Yeah.
Yes, and that this is it's ancient wisdom passed down from the indigenous people of North America who knew about this route, and it's been covered up by forces that don't want us to know that you can just buy this for nothing and burn the cancer out of you. It's crazy.
Or you have those groups that claim that there was no cancer until just recently, that it's a new phenomenon, even though they found it in ancient Egypt, like it's always been around. But they'll say, no, it's a new phenomenon. And it's really quite challenging. And it's quite challenging on all sides, because it does tug into those essential fears and our mortality. I mean, it doesn't get much more essential than that, does it? I watched a talk in person, which was not good for the woman that was running the talk, where she basically did every single one of these. How you think, how you eat, that it was your fault from whatever you thought in the past. And that if you undid all of this and paid her lots of money, that, your cancer would go. I mean, it was so blatant. And everyone there was like clapping and smiling. And I was just sitting on my hands and then biting my tongue. And then I thought, I'm not biting my tongue anymore. And I said, so tell me, how much do you make from each one of these treatments? And she kind of clocked that I was not a helpful person in the audience. And I went up to her afterwards and I said, what you're doing, it was like a lot of really, really detrimental things. I said, what you're doing is blaming people who have cancer, and you're not doing it in a way that's empowering. You're doing it in a way that their family members think that, because they're not taking this, crazy thing, that they're giving up, and I said, you're really ruining people's lives spreading this. And there was like a group of people around, and someone like immediately gave me a hug afterwards and went, thank you so much for saying that. But it was really hard. I didn't know what to say. Like I'd love to have gone up and said exactly the right thing, that perfect. But actually in the face of that, it was really hard. Yeah. And she had said so many mistruths. Like there wasn't even ambiguous little statements. Yeah. It was just clearly one after the other, one fear after the other. But she did probably get some business that day. Yeah. Which was...
and I think that's the thing that's really hard, like the Belle Gibsons of the world, who maybe encouraged people to stop their treatment and to go down a different route, which wasn't going to help them. Actually, that is really damaging, right? And potentially killing people. And yet they make money off of it. And that's yeah.
I mean, it almost, like, you guys who know me will know my interest in cults. But like it doesn't sound too dissimilar. If I'm looking at how like cult leaders work, they will convince you that they are the only people with the answer, and that if you don't follow them, then you're not going to have the path to wherever you want to get to. And there are so many parallels. They cut you off from your family. They say this is the only way. If you do that, then you can't be part of this group. You're kind of ostracized. They take your money. And then it's kind of like when you read about something like Scientology, they've spent, by the time you spent $100,000, $200,000, you're in. And then you feel kind of like, well, I'm committed now. I spent all this, I've got to commit, and I can't back out. And so it just highlights, doesn't it, how difficult it is to challenge those people as well. Like you say, Tatum, what would have been the perfect thing to say to that person?
She was offering one of those electric machines. That was one of the treatments. Yeah. And actually when I looked in her eyes, like there was nothing behind her eyes. So like, I mean, kind of classic. Or she didn't put the glamour on for me. I'm sure she glamours other people. I'm sure her eyes sparkle and dance with the idea of dollar signs. But yeah, like that level of coldness is really hard to confront.
Yeah, and I think you see that. I mean, there's other sort of quote unquote therapies out there, aren't there, where you can go away somewhere, Germany, for example, but also, the US or probably even parts of the UK, although I think it's more regulated. But, where someone, I don't know, they people have died because they paid $2,000 for a baking soda infusion, or they only eat fruits and vegetables, and they have coffee enemas 3 times a week, and that kind of stuff is also.
I think the enemas are 3 times a day.
Oh my God!
Oh, wow.
So I mean,
you'd literally like live on the toilet, right? Like, how would that?
Yeah.
Oh no.
I know. So, are there any favorite cancer scams that we haven't covered yet that you have?
Oh.
I mean, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, who actually, bless her, it was not her scam, it was her mum's scam. It was a kind of Munchausen's by proxy situation, who, that story is just insane.
Can you tell us the story?
So essentially this little girl, and I'm not quite sure from what age, was told by her mother that she was sick and was kept in a wheelchair and she couldn't walk. And she was told she had cancer, that she had a kind of leukemia, but also that she had a plethora of other illnesses. And this girl, I think she was mid-teens, but she looked about 8 or 9 because she was so tiny, had been taken from doctor to doctor. And basically her mother would take her to a doctor and convince them to do some kind of treatment or surgery or something. And then the doctor would kind of twig and realize that something wasn't right. I don't quite know how they twigged after doing surgery, but that's another story. And eventually would just move on to the next doctor. I think it's obviously quite different in the States where you can, a bit easier to do that, isn't it? But yeah, this poor girl, apparently her mother had just been basically tranquilizing her and giving her a load of drugs for years because she got support from people around her. They got money to, people fundraised for them to do new house. And eventually, the reason I know the story as my true crime head is because eventually Gypsy Rose worked out what was going on and secretly snuck off and met a boy, and they ended up killing her mother. So, it all didn't end very happily at all.
It didn't end well for anyone.
No.
Nobody's happy. So yeah, this poor girl who'd been part of this kind of scam for her whole growing up ended up in prison.
Oh,
the whole situation's just awful. But yeah.
There's when you were talking about that, it also made me think of another reason why us as a community are particularly vulnerable, is that for many of us, we've had something go wrong within the medical system. Like, we've been misdiagnosed. We weren't listened to. It took several or 8 or 9 attempts to get a doctor. We were dismissed. We were told that we were too young. And so when we've been either dismissed or discredited, or we have a fear of the medical establishment, and then someone else is saying, oh, I have the answers, and the fact that, so many mistakes can happen, like with Gypsy, that all those doctors miss that for so many years, it's such you understand why we can sort of leap with oh, well, maybe there's another way where I'll be listened to.
And I think that's the narrative that a lot of these sorts of people, they prey on as well, right? Because a lot of them, I don't really want to name a specific other cancer scammer, but there are a number of people out there who will claim, like we were talking about earlier, that they cured themselves, they with whatever, whether it's mistletoe or wheatgrass, after having a terrible time where they weren't taken seriously by the medical establishment. And so I think then, like, you're right, as patients, you go, oh, well, they had a tough time too. So if they're throwing out conventional therapy and going down this alternative route, maybe that's what I should do. And that's kind of how they make their money. But what you often find if you go deep is they either never explain what treatment they really had, or they will, if they do admit to having treatment, that's not the thing that saved them, right? And so that's really difficult, because you might relate to them on some level, because they can reflect your experience. You had a hard time being diagnosed. People didn't take you seriously. The doctor was a bit of a jerk, that kind of stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what they do afterwards is right either.
Well, it just showed, like I was going to say as well, that what it taps into really, isn't it, is they offer certainty. These people, they're so sure, whereas often medics, and I think some of the best doctors, will be really clear about, I can't guarantee, I'm really hopeful that this treatment will help you, but I'm not gonna say 100% this will cure, that. And it's that we talk about it a lot in Shine, don't we, living with uncertainty, and that's really hard. And then if you've got someone out there who appears to offer you a definite 100% solution and be completely, like, that's appealing when you're feeling like, I just want someone to make these decisions for me, or or to take that feeling of like what ifs away. If you can have 100% faith in something, then wow, that's powerful.
Really is. So if somebody is teetering on the edge, they've read an article about an upcoming cure, and they're wondering, like, is this something that I should fly to another country for? Is there a place that they can go to have a look and check out the science?
So, I mean, there are a few websites that we use at Shine. Certainly the Cancer Research UK website has a lot of information on it about, cancer treatment and how they work, as well as they often have blogs. If something has come out in the press saying, eating a rasher of bacon a day is going to kill you, they might write a blog to explain why that's probably not the case. I think there's also an organization called Sense About Science, which is really useful to look at. And I think that it's this organization that has something that says something like, oh, it's not going to hurt me, is it? But actually some of this stuff does hurt you. Black salve will hurt you. Eating 5 fruits and vegetables a day probably is going to be fine. That's what we should all be doing. So, I think it's about finding balance, and that's probably what they encourage. And the other website, which we use sometimes, is Memorial Sloan Kettering, which is in the US. But they've got a sort of online encyclopedia of lots of herbs and alternative treatments, and it will explain what the evidence for and against them is. So that can be useful. But I think also going to talk to your doctor, and just, if you are thinking of doing something or taking something, just speaking to them to make sure that whatever it is you do isn't going to hurt you and doesn't interfere with your treatment as well. Because some of this stuff, it might be a herb. I feel like saying herbs and spices, but I think they don't use spices that way. But it might be a herb, but it doesn't mean it's not powerful, right?
Yeah. I remember, I don't know how true, I just remember it as a random thing, that I wasn't allowed to drink green tea during my radiation. But that was the doctor that told me that. And I used to have this like white green tea that I loved. And I was like, really? A cup of tea would make a difference? But
that was
the radiation doctor that told me that, but so it is good just to run it by them. You were going to say,
I feel like I drank a lot of green tea. I didn't have radiation, but I certainly went through a green tea phase. This will stop my cancer from coming back.
No, I was just going to say there are quite a few, particularly chemotherapy tablets, I think, that there are all sorts of foods you're just not allowed to eat on them. Like I have a good friend who can't have anything with lemon or cranberries, or it's quite a long list. So it's definitely worth checking these things out.
So if there is something that someone comes across that's like a complementary, that they're not doing for a curative intent, but just to feel good while going through treatment, is there like a certain, like, anywhere that you would recommend going to make sure that you're complimentary therapist isn't gonna, unload some weird theory of your cancer onto you.
I must admit, the fact that I have no idea speaks quite a lot about this area, doesn't it? Obviously we come across a lot of different organizations and groups and so many people who've gone through all treatment, and I still don't know. I don't know where is reliable. If
It's
someone was
really
attached
tough
to a hospital, but then it is, it's going back to the medical side, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the question that you always have to ask is who's making money out of this, right? So and are they selling you a package of things with that certainty Claire talked about, or are they just saying, this might be something that gives you comfort or makes you feel better, right? So, a massage, if you're allowed to have a massage with your treatment, or, aromatherapy, that kind of stuff. And like you said, is often offered by reputable cancer centers. So your Maggie's centers, that kind of thing. That's probably okay. But it's when someone starts wanting to charge you a lot of money because they know the truth, that's when I would always have a question.
Yeah.
I think as well, anyone who's willing, any practitioner who's willing to really get into a chat with you about it, and so that you could say, I'm not sure about this, what do you think? And anyone who's I'm 100% certain, I'd be like, no, I'm dubious of you now. I think anyone.
I always thought that my acupuncturist, who was amazing, I loved her, and I had some amazing experiences during my chemo. I went to acupuncture twice a week. I loved it. I always thought that she'd be biting her lip. She wanted to say other things, but she didn't say it when she was in the cancer center because she knew she couldn't. But I imagine she had lots of theories in her mind. But yeah, sometimes in places like cancer centers, even therapists know kind of the boundaries of what they should and should not say, and will have had some kind of training in that, hopefully. So yeah, and those things can be incredibly helpful. So to finish off, to take ourselves away from all the fraudsters and scammers for a minute, should we say something that we love about the real cancer community? The legitimate ones that aren't trying to sell you anything.
I also think at this point it's worth saying that between us, we've probably come into contact with thousands of people who've had cancer, and how many this is not the norm, is it? We can trust the cancer community that we have. Let's not start being skeptical about everything and everyone in it. Because the reality is, for me, the cancer community is just such an amazing place to share all this stuff. And my favorite thing personally is the sense of humor around it all.
You stole mine. That's what I was gonna say.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kine. I just got in there early. But yeah, the fact you couldn't obviously not everything is funny, but you can have a sense of humor about some of it, and being able to share that, and in ways that you might feel limited around friends and family who, sometimes are a bit more sensitive. That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, I'm not going to change what I'm going to say. I was going to say exactly the same thing. I think the sense of humor, and I guess the friendships as well. I'm lucky to have met you guys through having cancer. But I think, hopefully through Shine or through the wider cancer community, people get to meet other people who can support them and who can understand what they're going through, but also give them a shoulder to cry on and a shoulder to laugh with, right? So someone that you can laugh at the ridiculous things that happen, and so you've got someone who can bring you a picture of black salve and a weird electromagnetic machine that will cure you, and you can have a laugh about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you so much. This has been so much fun, and I really appreciate everybody and all of you listening to this today. Feel free to get in touch. We are now on Podbeam, so we're on Amazon, we're on all the places. We're on Google Podcasts, we're on iTunes now. So if you see us please rate us. Please subscribe. We'll be doing a podcast once a month, and we are very happily to be supported by Radio Facilities, who are recording us today. Yes, and they are fabulous. And so we couldn't be doing this without them. So, till next time, bye.
Bye.